When I first started at Google, my first week, I ran into Larry Page in the hallway. I thought, oh, that was back in the days when giants walked here. Right? And so I ran into Larry and he said, what are you doing here? I thought, that's not a good way to start your career. And I said, well, I'm here to study how people search. I'm a UXR, and I'm going to do that. He said, oh, I know how people search. They start searching, and in 2 weeks, they become expert users. I said, really? I'm going to study that. And so here it is 13 and a half years later, and I'm still studying that, right? So Larry was wrong in a deep way. People do not become expert at using Google unless you're Larry Page or Jeff Dean or somebody like that. So the real question for today is, so how do people learn to search? So I thought I'd start it off by sort of starting with the answer from friends. That's it. So you have to leave. You've got 99% of it here. But I have a few more slides to sort of amplify on that. And not only do they learn from friends, but they also learn a little bit from classes. And I say this not because I've done a logs analysis of it, but because I've done a lot of studies. So the past 13 years I've been here, I've done at least 300 field studies. That is, I've gone and sat in 300 different people's houses or workplaces and actually watched them do stuff. I've taught more than 500 classes, and that's a scary number. But I realized I just taught 2 classes this week alone. So let me see, 13 years times 50 weeks times 2, I get it, it's like a lot, right? So it's a lot of that. I've done more than 100 surveys. I just don't remember how many anymore. Anywhere from like having a sample size of 10,000 down to a sample size of 30 or so. I also have a lot of data from the Power Searching MOOC, Power Searching with Google.com MOOC, which has had at this point over 4.1 million students go through it. So I'll show you my favorite graph from that analysis a little bit later. But a lot of this kind of experience comes from standing in the back of the class and watching students learn how to search. And that comment, that wisecrack about friends, you see how they're paired up? That's important. That's important. Because in these surveys, these studies I've done, if you ask people, well, how do you know that? Where did you learn how to use semicolon? Oh, no idea, right? And mostly it's lost in the dim, dark past of their memory. But from observation, I see people saying, hey, this is how you do it. Or more commonly, you ask me, how'd you do that? And that's what starts the conversation. So now, step back for a second, right? We have all seen process diagrams like this, which are, in theory, canonical models of the search process, right? You have this sort of diagram which starts with a vague, inarticulate expression of desire, and then you do some kind of searching thing, identify your sources. There are countless papers on that. So that's one down there by Kuhlthau is probably most well regarded these days. But the thing that's interesting about that, it's a perfect searcher. They already know everything they need to know. They never forget how to do the searches, and that's not true. Beth has done a really nice piece of work in her PhD thesis about how students, young kids, evolve in their search practices from basically typing random stuff to being more structured and having a lot more understanding about how search works and so on. So there is interesting things. So within the span of, say, high school, this process changes. Over the course of your lifetime, or since 1998, it changes again. So not only do we need to understand how people learn to search, we need to understand how they forget to search. I ran this, I don't have the diagram in here, but I ran a fantastic study on my MOOC where I had, I think it was 500,000 students, and I measured their before and after progress in the course over 2 weeks, and it was great. Fantastic, you got this nice, beautiful, normal distribution of responses and improvements, and a few students who got worse. Here's a tip. If you're studying how students learn stuff, if some of them aren't getting worse, you don't have real data. So I've never seen that in any other paper. But when you have a population that large, inevitably some of your students will get worse. And if they're not, then somebody's monkeyed with the data. So I want to point this out because the world is different. That was what the search world was like when I was a student. Does anybody here actually use the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature? Okay. some of the more chronologically gifted among us.
Oh, I love that one.
We have learned how to actually use it, and this is like the worst search tool in the universe because it's periodically updated and it's concatenative. So if you want to go back 3 years, you got to walk down 5 yards and pull out. It's terrible, and it's often not indexed by terms that you recognize. But we learned how to accommodate it. Remember this, because this is the canonical representation of information repository. Big library, right? We know how these things work. We know how magazine racks work. This presentation of information is phenomenal for browsing. Terrible coverage, but a wonderful UI, because with that, you could sort of scan very quickly and say, oh, all the food magazines are over on the far right, second shelf. Right? Can you do that online? No. Have you tried searching for magazines online? The experience is terrible. It's almost impossible to get a browsed experience for magazines, even from Google. You know what this is. This is a lovely piece of oaken furniture, right? For people who haven't used that, it's a card catalog. And each card represents an entry in the collection of codices, which is the library. Now, the beautiful thing about that is they make them out of wood. They last like this for a very long time. You may think it's a bug, but it's a feature. And I want to point out that, because the world has changed, it's not necessarily better in all aspects. This is an interview I did with this woman at Stanford. I'm sorry about the low res, but there was a time when video was very hard. And this is a reflection of that time. But listen to what she says about her ability to look for credible, viable content on the web.
95% of the internet is crap. 5% of it is solid. And what I mean by that is I don't trust it. I don't what I would like I feel like Wikipedia is a credible source. I feel like, ACC is a credible source. I feel like there's sites that I can go to that I know I can count on. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I'll search for it and some crappy blog will come up about it from some person that I've never heard of. And I wish there was an organization based on credibility or quality. Not an organizational scheme, but instead of just pulling up the most popular ones, pull up the most useful ones or the most credible ones, I pull up images sometimes and I'll get I'm pulling up an image of, Time magazine and I'll be someone jacking off. And I'm okay, why does that happen when I'm doing a Google search for an image? Why is there so much crap? That's not what I want. So that's my thing I don't want them to or censor the internet, but I would like to know that what I'm looking for has some quality.
And you don't think they're doing that today?
Meaning us.
They probably are, but maybe just not a good enough job. I just get frustrated. It's like junk mail. It's that same, I want to pull up something and I want it to be dead on. They do have a lot of incredible stuff, but they have a lot of junk too.
She is, or was at the time, a webmaster for Stanford.edu. She knows, she's a very technically savvy person, and yet she's got this real problem with search. And one of the big barriers for all searchers, in particular for younger searchers, especially as they grow older into college and so on, and there have been endless studies on this. How do you pick the terms that you search on? Identifying keywords is probably the biggest problem that searchers have, especially when they're young. Although I've seen lots of crazy searches on older people as well. Just because you're older doesn't give you the magic of keyword choice. Part of the problem is we have such a wealth of content. But having said that, how do you get to the thing you want to find? So I and a bunch of other people have asked endless students to draw diagrams like this. Draw me how Google works. Can you do that? I won't make you do it. I've had people refuse to do that. When you say, no, I'm not doing it. Please? No. Now this is from a computer science student, right? And you can see there's a search engine here and there are web crawlers, and they've got a lot of the parts labeled correctly. That's a computer science model. This is what most people do. They draw models like that. So at a well-known institution, well-known university, I won't embarrass by saying the name, I had a class do this. 30% of the pictures I got back had the word magic on it somewhere. That tells you something, right? So what's happening here is people do not have a really great model. This is several overlapping concentric circles, nonlinear Boolean targets. I have no idea what that means. And yet, that's the best expression of how Google works that person could come up with. Guess what? We index all kinds of stuff. We have over 20 million books in Google Books. We get all this video uploaded to YouTube every second. We have 78,000 anteater images. God knows how many lolcat images, right? It's great to have all that breadth, but it's all searchable. But, for example, you can go and say, what's the population in Japan, and get a nice answer. How tall is the Empire State Building? All this stuff, right? This is our glory. Congratulations, we succeeded. Right?
Yeah, yes.
However,
Love the last one.
however, right? Stuff is being added all the time. So what you know now, it's wrong now. You're out of date. You're instantly out of date. So it's like one Library of Congress is being added every day and the rate of acquisition is accelerating. It's speeding up. So how do researchers who have non-concentric overlapping Boolean models of content think about that? So this is a video that Laura Granke did years ago, but it's perfect because it captures a great intuition about how people think or don't think about the structure of search. So let me run this little video for you. And listen to what he says. Ignore the pink dot. That's just the eye tracking dot.
So, yeah, I want to try with one last thing. Okay. MVP thing. Okay. I'll see what happens. I mean, activities for kids. Oh, see? They're not giving me a chance, man. They always...
I forgot to say what the task was. The task was to figure out something to do on Saturday night for fun. Right? Very simple task. Simple request.
For kids. No wonder I couldn't find. I should type adult. Okay. Activities. See? That's what I mean. So it's really hard to search for these activities.
I love the nervous laughter from Laura. It's like, and the next query, which I'm not going to show you, is adult activity in San Francisco Saturday night. So what's funny about this, right? What's funny about it is this guy doesn't know the internet is for porn, right? He doesn't know, if he knew that, he wouldn't have done it in front of Laura, right? He would not have anticipated that there's whole fields of dragons out there in that continent of internet. He has no knowledge of this somehow. How did he miss it? So what are people thinking about? We looked at, for example, the population in Japan, but what about 1490? Can you answer that question? Good luck. How about something like, how much does the Empire State Building weigh? I know how tall it is. How much does it weigh? So there's still questions that are really tough for us to answer. And I don't doubt that someday Porky Pig will have a web answer that will say the Empire State Building weighs 29,000 tons or whatever. But will it ever be able to answer why do swallows appear so often in the works of Monty Python? Maybe not. Maybe that's an integrative task that's beyond what we can do. But if you've got that question as a human, what do you do? Like, why is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea a classic? It's an okay story, but what makes it a classic? So, can we understand these things? And some of these come up.
For.
Pardon?
That's what you need UGC for.
Yeah, right. We'll come to UGC.
All right.
But a lot of these happen, and the reason I'm bringing up examples like this is these are all examples people have asked me. Students have asked me these questions. So, driving down Highway 5, and there's this big clump of mountains there. Central Valley, what is it? How would you find out? I know you know. How do they figure it out? How do they learn to ask that question? And just as importantly, how do they learn to have the attitude of searching? Because that's as important as actually having a technical skill. questions like this come up. Somebody sent me, that's literally an image that somebody sent me, said, what does that say? You may not recognize it. It's actually, I figured out it's Amharic. What does that say? Google Translate does not do Mayan glyphs yet. Right? Or what's that? I actually knew the answer to that off the top of my head, but how do you search by image for that? Or what would you do? Deeper point. If you're a searcher, what do you have to know? What do you have to learn to be able to answer a question like that? Or better, like that. Bug bites my son, right? Do I need to take him to the ER or not? How can I find that out? Let me tell you, search by image sucks for this. Does not work at all. Because every insect bite in the universe is red thing around it. Let me ask you this question for you expert Google searchers. Can I find a facsimile of the score? According to Ponton? Actually, you can. Do you know how? So my deep point is as people grow in their ability to learn how to search, they start with sort of basic things. Pizza, New York. Pizza, Mountain View. And they grow in their capability, but they have to know what's possible. And that's a deep barrier for learning how to search. In the medical health records thing, right? What's possible? Can I index by second letter of last name? I don't know. Maybe you can. So there's an interesting question here about what the mental models are of our searchers, because that's inextricably linked with how they learn how to search. So does a search engine do complete keyword indexing? Does it full text indexing? Does it do stemming? Do you know the answer, right? How do you know? So the answer is people have these incredibly variable models. And it's sort of true within a single subpopulation. So I did a crazy field study where I was interviewing nothing but bus drivers in Los Angeles. And it turns out they're extremely variable. Choose any population. And aside from university faculty members, they're variable too, right? So coverage, when you ask, people will say, well, what can you find with Google? And they'll say everything. And they mean that almost literally. That all videos and all movies and all books 24/7, they take that literally. So it's an interesting question, right? What can you do? So here, I'm just going to show you two really quick videos of field study we did with this kid named Cameron. Just listen to him talking about his uses of Google. I'm going to show you one.
So how often do you do internet searches?
Every day.
And how many times a day would you say?
3 or 4.
Kind of
What
taciturn.
kinds of things do you typically search for?
Cars, material for papers, research, websites. If I know the company name and I want to go to a website, I'll search that.
So the interesting thing there is we went through his history with his permission. We actually reviewed it. And it's kind of watches, cars, stuff for papers, things like that. All 1- and 2-word queries, right? And you click a couple times, he's done. So prototypical searcher in that sense. But listen to him talk about the coverage here, in particular with respect to the searches that he wants to do. So this is Cameron, 19 years old, living somewhere in the peninsula. Listen to how he describes the capabilities of Google.
I mean, no matter what you type, there's not really a hard answer. It's something hard to find in my mind. I think if people that are looking up like physics and like an atom or something like that, or some kind of atom, maybe it's harder. I have no idea. But I guess everyday things that I do, there's something hard to find.
So you've never been stumped?
No, never.
You ever been stumped? No, never. Well, he doesn't ask really hard questions. He doesn't ask about atoms and stuff like that. So it's characteristic, though, of people throughout the country, throughout the world, right? So the mental models piece here is, what does Google look? How does it look it up? What's the index? How are results ranked? These are questions that you have to at least have some intuition for. In particular, things like, well, what is in the index? What kinds of things do we do? So a couple of years ago, I used to teach a class internally, actually 2 classes, one for general people at Google, how to use Google. for Googlers. You'd be surprised. Every month for years, I used to run this class. I'd always get 30 people because we max out at 30, which was interesting. And once a year, I'd offer a class for Google search engineers. And I would basically give them hard problems like this one. Find an aerial image of the house, the Squire House, 900 University, downtown Palo Alto, taken before 1977. How hard can that be, right? Well, sample size of search engineers was 250. None of them got it. 0. What? Well, you have to understand that that book has this very nice picture of that house, an aerial picture taken in 1935. This house has been around forever, right? You can also find it on that historicalaerials.com. What went wrong? Google search engineers are pretty smart people, right? This is the product that they built. Why could they not drive that? So the answer is really interesting. The solution I thought they were all going to immediately see was that they could all easily use Google Earth and use the image archive feature to go back, in this case, to September 1948. Did you know you could do that? Did you know that Google Earth has an archive feature? Right. You're Googlers, right? You live here. You live in the city of sin. And yet, search engineers didn't know about it. How are ordinary searchers trying to figure out how to do their searching supposed to figure this out? I would argue we have to actually teach our students, our searchers, our population, that there are sort of meta skills. If you don't know how to find something, maybe there's a tool that can do it for you, and that would be a search skill. As far as I know, I'm the only person in the universe who's teaching that skill. I've never seen it in any curriculum on how to do information retrieval. I've never seen it on information science curriculum. So obviously you can search for things like that if you know what it is. Search by image is terrible with this. I will tell you it's Saint-Chapelle in Paris. But if you don't know, how would you think to, did you know you could find it? Same problem here. Angkor Wat, the Google Cultural Institute has a fantastic repository. It has 3D animated models you can fly through. Great history, timelines, Angkor Wat. It's on page 5 when you do the search. Nobody goes there. If you don't know about the resource, in this case, one of the world's best resources, you're not going to find it, right? So what does it mean to be a good searcher? How do you learn to search for that stuff? Part of the answer has to be that you know what's possible. We have a huge collection of online digitized newspapers, including this one from the Afro-American Ledger from 1906, from downtown Baltimore, the first Black-owned national paper. So what do they need to know? What do our searchers need to know that they can do? Now, one of the things about this representation of knowledge, or the card catalog, is it's stable. You also have years of instruction on how to use it. You all know what the index is in the book, right? You all know what the table of contents is. You know how it's sorted. You know how it's mapped from index entry to page, and so on and so on, right? You, in fact, know a lot about the information architecture of this construct. Who taught you about the information architecture of Google? Right? Who teaches the kids in K-12? So I bring this up because if this is stability, the thing we work on is the paradigmatic example of instability. We can't even keep the Google logo straight for a couple years. People keep tinkering with it, even though it adds no obvious value, right? Oh, we have to be modern, right? Whatever. Okay, so once upon a time, that's 1998. I'm going to just flash through a couple of years here. Look at the affordances. So for example, here, this is 1998. We would direct you to Alta Vista if you couldn't find it on Google. Leave, go ahead and find it somewhere else, right? We don't do that anymore. We used to have groups that were searchable. We used to have directory, long gone. See where this is going? If you're trying to learn how to use this thing, imagine that you had a book that every year changed the font, changed the color, changed the things that were indexed, changed the access functions, changed the representation. And I'm not even up to 2019 yet.
Where's the black bar, you know? What year did the big black bar happen?
So you see where I'm going? We used to, once upon a time, have a timeline. You would search for content, and you could go back to 1621. We dumped that feature for no obvious reason. But it's interesting to see how we have evolved so much over time. So if you're learning how to search and you change everything every year, it gets hard. So what's possible to do? What can you do? If you look in a library, you know the library collection has been heavily curated. People have done a lot of trouble to maintain that collection, choose appropriate, highly qualified, highly credentialed books and content. What kinds of content can we find online? Well, you know, it's UGC. It's unmoderated, it's, whatever you want, right? So how do you do this? Part of the answer is, what's the mental model of access? What's the mental model of content through Google? So let me ask you a couple modest questions to test your understanding of what's possible. Can you find a picture of Britney Spears?
Yes.
Okay. How about Rula Lenska? Does anybody remember who Rula Lenska was? Is that a real name? Or did I make it up? Right? Actress from the 20s. Yes. How about a picture of your grandmother? Mark, can you find a picture of your grandmother online?
Not on Google.
Okay. Anybody else?
Not public, but yes.
Oh, okay, but I'm in public, yeah. Turns out I found a picture of my grandmother. It turned out to be public. Turned out to be an Ellis Island photo when she immigrated. I didn't think about that. Right? How about this? My grandmother, yes. A video of Ted Williams hitting a home run? Probably. Now, how do you know that? Because you recognize Ted Williams, you do not recognize Rula Lenska. Maybe Rula Lenska is a Major League Baseball player, right? Ted Williams, you recognize. So my point is, you bring a lot of knowledge to the search activity about domains, about content, organization. How about a video of my grandmother hitting a home run? You laugh, but it's a reasonable question, right? You laugh because you know it's stupid, right? You have a deeply held world model. My grandmother is probably not playing baseball, and certainly not in the time of video. So you know a lot about how to craft these kinds of queries. So this is complicated now, because if you go to the web right now and type in that guy's name, you'll get a very nice set of results. Beautiful. You go to the phone, you do that, and you get different results. We are producing not just one thing that we're varying, we're producing two things that we're varying. Oh, and the assistant, that's three things we're varying. Right? How do you develop a mental model in a world where things change, not only constantly, but they have three models, three different versions of the thing? Now, we're great. One of the things we can do is mine out events like you see here. This is fabulous, right? Oh man, he's playing in Morocco. But how do you really trust those results? If you go on the web right now to Google and say, Saratoga Library, pulls up this thing, it's just exactly what you think. Great. I clicked on, down here it has events. So I thought, oh, how interesting. I'm giving a talk there. I wonder if I'm on the event list for the Saratoga Library. So I click on the events, and I noticed this thing that looks really odd and strange and interesting. The New York Tenants Justice League. Why is the Saratoga Library doing that? So I click on that, just kind of a curious guy, and I look at it, and it says, yes, the New York Tenants Justice League being held at Saratoga Library in Heritage Orchard, downtown Sunnyvale, Saratoga, but the source is brooklynlibrary.org. What went wrong? So I click on that, and it says the New York Tenants Justice League is meeting the Saratoga Library in Brooklyn. We mined out the events. You could just say, oh, it's a bug. How do you develop a model of credible sources or a model of what's possible when you have these kinds of things, right? Does your mental model allow for mistakes in the index like this? It should, but nobody teaches you how to identify that, how to do that kind of stuff. So one of the things I want to argue if you're going to learn how to search, is you have to know a fair bit about the cultural conventions and genres of our time. Oh, Dan, you postmodernist, right? But I'm serious about this, right? So I started listing out different kind of genres of things that we can find on the web, like, massive multiplayer online role-playing games, or, lolcats or whatever, right? But think about this. You have to know that this genre, that is data sets with visualizations, are easily accessible before you go search for them, right? I have been in endless classrooms where a student is trying to figure out what's the unemployment rate in my state. Did you Google unemployment rate Maryland? Because it will show you the answer, but they presume that the data is not there, so they don't think to bother to do the question. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. If you don't know the chicken, you're not going to search for the egg. I bring this up because this is kind of fundamental to learning what you can search for. I took this picture on a bike ride, and the question is, what kind of trees are those? Does anybody know?
Olive?
No, they're not olive. That's a good guess, though. So how would you find out? That's the real question I'm trying to get at. How would you learn to search for this? I'll show you the answer. It's basically, oh yeah, there's a bell ringing in the background. Why is there a bell ringing when I took that picture? Here's what you do. You have to download the EXIF metadata. You know what EXIF metadata is? Anybody? Yeah. I asked this question yesterday to the investigative reporters. 2 people in an audience of 50 said that they knew what EXIF metadata was. So when you take a cell photo, it attaches a whole pile of metadata to it, including the most interesting bit, which is right down here, the GPS metadata, the latitude and longitude. It wrote down where I was standing. So once you know that, you can drop that into Google Maps. Once you're in Google Maps, you can go to Street View. When you're in Street View, you can compare the source image with the Street View image. Yeah, same place, right? Then you look around and you notice that little sign there says Taffy House. Does your house have a name? Mine doesn't. Right? So I type in Taffy House like that in Los Altos Hills, and I discover it's the house where William Packard lived. If you Google William Packard and trees, you quickly find out he was a fan of apricot trees, right? And there's lots of articles about his orchard at the Taffy House. So I went very quickly from step to step to step. But if you don't know EXIF metadata, you don't know you can put lat long into maps, you don't know how to search. Who taught you that? I learned it because I work here. I live here. Right. So how about the church thing, or the bells? Only 2 things that cause bells to ring are churches and schools. So you go here and type church or school, you'll find in Los Altos Hills. It's not that, but it's that. What is that? That is, it says, if you look up close, Poor Clare Nunnery. What? It's a nunnery in the middle of Los Altos Hills, which is weird in and of itself. But you look at the time from the EXIF metadata, you then look for Poor Clare's bells in Los Altos Hills, and they show you a picture of the bell tower. And you click on their website and you quickly discover what it's there for. It's called to dinner at 4:30 in the afternoon. So when you start looking at how people search, one of the things you quickly learn is that they're very confident in their ability to search, right? We've all seen this data, or some version of this data. 92% they're confident or very confident, and yet 66% search less than 1 time a day. You don't get good at anything, do it once a day. We all have seen distributions like this. People don't search very much, and yet they're missing fundamental skills. Word choice for queries, and something simple like Control F, right? Control F, when I first reported this, people in the audience did not believe me. The report is basically, nobody knows how to use Control F, statistically speaking. I know you do. It allows you to do that on a Mac or that on a PC. And so if I say, how long did, go to a web page, say, how long did Beth take to run this race? You do Control F on that page and you get a nice answer and you're done. So I asked, in this case, 85 people. This is now an old chart. It's now up to like 300. It doesn't matter. The curve is exactly the same, just slightly smoother. The fascinating thing is a lot of people get it done in less than 20 seconds. These people know Control F. What happened to all these people? They don't know Control F. They're scrolling, right? It's like that, what's that cartoon, the UX That's it. You've seen it all, where somebody wants to
Poker
basically.
face.
Yeah, right, poker face. Yeah, exactly. They want to kill themselves because they're watching this, and you can't as a UXR. You have to be very nice and watch. Right? But what happened in this, I said, tell me in this little form how long Beth Smith took to run this race. And once you get up beyond 120 seconds, beyond 2 minutes, a quarter of the answers are wrong. How is that possible? That's crazy talk. Turns out people don't know Control F, also don't know Control C. Those are coupled. You don't know the keyboard shortcut. So they would type in the number, and a quarter of the time they get a number wrong. Ah, yes. You think I'm kidding. No, it's actually true. So we did this big survey. I've now done this multiple times. Actually, the new result, the new result is, well, 90% don't know, 50%, 93% of non-Firefox users. The new result, though, is that it's dropped by 1 point. I'm going to take total credit for that. This is over 4 years. I've managed to reduce ignorance of the world by 1%. One particular skill. Anyway, we did another study with about 2,000 people. We asked them questions like this, and we measured their time to resolve, blah, blah, blah. And here's the bottom line. If you know the skill, you know how to use Control F, you are 12% faster doing total time to resolve. That's a massive amount of time, because these are all various experiments that we ran to basically improve ranking or whatever, right? And you know, the ranking guys love to get a % improvement, but I can give you 12% with 30 seconds of instruction. So it's a massive thing. And more about these culture things. So that's a skill, but this is another kind of skill, knowing how to recognize a spoof. I know you probably have seen this spoof site, right? That doesn't stop lots of grade school kids from writing learned reports about the tree octopus. Or this one. You have to read this one carefully. This is a beautiful site. If you're curious, go check it out. This is a male pregnancy, new technology they have. You should know it's a spoof. We have not yet achieved male pregnancy. Or this one, my favorite. Pope Francis celebrating Mass. So how do you know it's fake? I mean, and now when we're getting into the world of deep fakes, this is becoming more and more critical, right? So we live in a world where fakery is deeply important, but it's not a new thing. This is that's Thomas Edison, and this is from his lab. See if the video is here, I'll just run it. It's a silent because it's back there. This is the Spanish-American War, 1899. Sharpshooters shooting from behind a dead horse coming from the Edison labs. But look, the horse ain't dead. The horse is not dead. This whole scene is faked. That's not Cuba, that's New Jersey. The trees are all wrong, right? So fakery has a long history, and yet people don't know how to understand what's possible, what's faked, and why someone would fake that. So video, we now know all about that. But do you know how many vampire journals there are? Right, so this is a paper published in a well-regarded journal, indexed in Google Scholar. How do we get rid of faked papers like that? Now, not only does content rapidly change, and not only do we change stuff all the time, but the underlying indexing technology changes as well, so you get new capabilities. That's a lot of what the search group is about. How can I give you a new search capability? Oh, and we're not going to tell you how it works. It's just going to do stuff, right? So here's an example. My son loves to go Stanford basketball games, right? And he records this song he loves. He comes to me and says, "Dad, you work at Google. How do I get this on my phone? I want it to song." Well, here's what I mean. This is the song. Probably have it. Etc. You get the idea. Okay. How do you search for something like that?
You open up Google Play Music and do the identify the song.
That's a great idea that totally doesn't work. I mean, I'm serious. It's really good. It's a really good solution. Shazam won't work, SoundHound won't work, none of those work. Because that's 1,000 drunken Stanford fans screaming at the top of their lungs. And all of those work off of pre-recorded, digitally copyrighted music. They're comparing to a clean source, right? When you get, Bob and 1,000 fraternity brothers screaming, oh, doesn't work. Right? So I know, I work at Google. I know how this works. And I said, give up. Being my son, when actually he goes to Google and types in, oh my God. That's it. That's the download, right?
His faith got him there.
Basically, yeah. What did I not get? How did I screw up? I didn't understand that there are thousands of question answering sites out there. And it only takes a few 16-year-old boys to click on oh song before Google figures it out and offers it as a suggestion. He now has this on his phone. No thanks to me. So, like I said, Shazam, somehow they don't work. So the world is literally full of content that you might not have thought about and access methods you might not have thought about. So this beautiful animated GIF is taken by the Japan Earth orbiting satellite, or geostationary satellite, but it's not a movie. It's a series of JPEGs that I put into an animated GIF. So how much work does the searcher have to do in identifying things that can then be put together to answer your question? Reference librarians often do this. They will go to an example data set and find something relevant to you and say, here you go, this is a subtable of the larger table. Right? We can't quite do this yet. So it's important that we, as users of Google, learn how to ask questions. So it's a critical learning skill. And for example, talking about fakes, how do you learn to assess the quality of a site or a web page? Who teaches you that? I never had a class like that. If you ask librarians, and I've asked a lot of librarians this question, how do you teach this? Well, talk about low-quality sites like Wikipedia. That's not a great answer, right? So they struggle, is the answer. They struggle to give that kind of instruction. So in particular, student sent me this. It said, this seems a little bogus to me, but I don't know why. I can't identify why this might be low quality. So it's EPAFacts.com. Any spidey sense going off yet? Looks like the Environmental Protection Agency, except EPA offers paid leave to employees caught with pot at work. Why would the EPA write about that? It's crazy. It's inconsistent. It's incongruent. The message goes against what you think the Environmental Protection Agency is all about. So you look at this, and you look at their about this site, and it says EPA Facts is Project Environmental Policy Alliance, Spidey Sense number 2, Environmental Policy Alliance. Okay, now here's the trick. You have to know the EPA means Environmental Protection Agency. So if you're in the 8th grade or 9th grade, you may not know that acronym expands out to those 3 terms. If you're trying to do a search and you're in the 9th grade, what do you type? EPA means a lot of things. You learn it stands for Environmental Policy Alliance or Environmental Protection Agency. So there's a skill, there's a meta learning skill there. So
and also .com versus
correct. That was the very first one. Exactly. Yeah. So it says here the highlighting the high cost of Environmental Protection Agency. So they actually mentioned the other EPA. Oh yeah, that's the EPA.gov logo. You see what they're doing? This has BS written all over it, right? So these are the kinds of skills you need. These are what you need to know in addition to, now I want to drive the nail in this particular coffin. So this is the street address of the Environmental Policy Alliance. And this is the street address of another company at the same location. Go search for Berman & Company and you'll find it's a lobbying agency. You pay them a lot of money and they will lobby whatever for you. Big pharma, big ag, big oil, whatever. Big anti-EPA. So what's the real EPA? Oh, they're on Pennsylvania Avenue. That makes sense, because I know that where Pennsylvania Avenue is. Again, if you're in the 11th grade, you probably don't know that. If you live in DC, that you would know that. If you live in Seattle, you have no clue. Okay, so turns out my friend Sam Weiberg at Stanford has done this really nice study showing that 80% of students in grade school, 80% of students at well-known universities cannot figure this out. That process I just went through, 80% would fail. Right? What can we do? Well, I don't know how to solve the problem per se, because doing credibility analysis is deeply hard and deeply technical. But I can teach. And I can teach these skills to people. So I think part of the answer is we need to be able to design these kinds of systems, that is, Google, to support this kind of deep understanding of information, what I call informacy. And we need to teach people how to do this. So I have this modest MOOC called PowerSearchingWithGoogle.com. Started about 6 years ago now. And you can take it, it's totally free. And so far we've had 4.1 million students go through it. So right now, as we speak, there are probably 500 students in there right now working away on stuff. And this is the best chart of my entire Google career. I'm so happy with this chart. Let me explain it to you. So we did this with Rory Sayers. Bless him. We did a cohort analysis where we broke up everybody who registered in red, and we had this magic function that measured their, say, search skill over time. And we had a 2-week pre-period, and then the 2.5 weeks of the class, and then a 2.5 week post-period. So we got before, during, and after, right? And if you look at red, this is what they did coming in. They kind of, in this band, so roughly at 0.4, measuring their skill and their use of operators and all that jazz, okay? During the course of the course, they get about to here, so this is all boring introduction, and they suddenly start getting much better. I'll explain this in a second. They got up to here roughly at 1.6. They quadrupled their performance during that time, okay? And after the course, performance went down. I thought, oh, I'm sad. But it stabilized at 0.8. Every educator in the world will tell you students forget stuff after the class, right? But the nice thing about this thing is it's stable at 0.8. So I have doubled their performance after the class for 2 weeks, tracking them. This is hard, as you know. So what's the red thing? The red thing are people who dropped out of the course. So they got a little bit better, and then they kind of fell back to kind of where they were. So if you drop out mid-course, you get nothing. You just wasted a week. Okay. Finally, the blue one is the hoi polloi. This is 1 million random sampled people across the world. Right? So I write a blog, and every week I basically ask a question, and answer it with a story. So that's the answer. People learn how to search from their friends, and a little bit from classes. And the important part about my blog and about the way I teach and what I've learned is that people learn by remembering stories. So stories, in fact, there's a really nice piece of work by Lucy Suchman, my friend at Park, and so on, Julian Orr, who worked for me. Stories are the key idea. They are the coin of the realm for remembering these deeply technical things. So if you're interested in these kinds of stories, 1 a week, it's not hard. And what happens is that each of these stories now has turned into my new book. So I'm advertising my book. We just settled on the title yesterday. For people who are old enough, that title should be resonant.
Yeah.
It was not originally titled that. But as my editor pointed out, she said, search, sex, it's just another thing that people think they're good at and they're not. She said that, not me. So that's the new book. It should be out in May. And I hope it communicates a lot of stories to people, including the story you might not have expected in chapter 17. There are times you got to get out of Google and leave. You got to go do it another way. And I'll talk about how to do that, how to know that. So I think that's the summary. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. not only do we need to build better tools and teach these things, but, we have learning to do ourselves. I didn't get the song right either, right? Google search engineers didn't figure out how to use Google Earth. What else do we not know? What else can we do to improve ourselves?